Let's jump right into this explainer. We are looking at one of the absolutely most monumentally important moments in all of modern history, the fall of the Berlin Wall. It literally reshaped the globe, ended the Cold War, and triggered the collapse of communist rule across Eastern Europe. But you know what's wild? Instead of starting at the beginning, we're going to start right at the climax.
Listen to this quote. Immediately, without delay. It's just a simple kind of confused sentence from an East German official, right? Well, that specific sentence accidentally triggered the collapse of the entire Iron Curtain. When Günter Schabowski muttered those exact words during a live television broadcast, he had absolutely no idea he was dismantling a massive global geopolitical divide in real time.
Section 1. A history-making mistake. The press conference that changed the world.
Okay, so here's the crucial context. Schabowski hadn't actually been involved in any of the discussions about the new travel policies he was up there to announce. It was November 9th, 1989, and shortly before the press briefing, he's just handed a piece of paper by the East German leader. So when reporters start pressing him with questions near the end of the hour, he just reads directly from that draft note, which basically said East Germans could apply to migrate through all border crossings.
It's a perfect illustration of a cascading bureaucratic failure bringing down a whole empire. A draft law is written just to relieve the massive pressure of refugees fleeing through other countries. Schabowski gets the note, but crucially, nobody gives him any instructions. An Italian journalist asks when these new rules take effect. Schabowski sort of shuffles his papers, hesitates, and just incorrectly assumes the answer based on the opening paragraph. He tells the world immediately.
Section 2. Berlin before the fall. The grim reality of a divided city.
Now, to truly grasp the sheer magnitude of what happened next, it's absolutely crucial that we understand the deep, dark reality of life in Berlin before the wall came down. After World War II, Germany was split. West Berlin became this enclave of democratic government, capitalist freedom, and economic growth. But right next door, East Berlin operated under Soviet control, with a planned economy, highly restricted movement, and intense government surveillance. It was literally two totally different worlds, existing side by side in a single sea.
And keeping those two worlds apart was 155 kilometers of concrete. That's how long the brutal barrier was that physically split the city into two isolated halves, starting in 1961, effectively keeping East Germans from fleeing to the west. And it wasn't just a static wall either. By 1989, there were 302 watchtowers looming over that concrete barrier. Imagine that. They were a terrifying, everyday reminder of the constant surveillance the citizens of East Germany were living under. In fact, calling it just the Berlin Wall is almost misleading. It was actually two separate 4-meter-tall walls, and sandwiched between them was the death strip. This was a heavily guarded, heavily mined military zone. Border guards had explicit official authorization to shoot anyone attempting to cross. The wall was a deadly trap, fully designed to keep citizens locked inside the East. Section 3. The pressure builds. The tipping point of 1989.
You see, a wall that heavily fortified doesn't just fall without an immense amount of pressure behind it, and the momentum leading up to November was becoming completely unstoppable across Eastern Europe. Back in August, the Pan-European picnic opened the border between Austria and Hungary, which basically created a massive loophole in the Iron Curtain. By September, thousands of refugees at the West German embassy in Prague were allowed to leave. The domestic crisis in East Germany got so severe that by October, longtime leader Erich Honecker was forced to step down.
Driven by everyday citizens and shifting Soviet policies, the East German people relentlessly pushed back. Over in the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev's policy of glasnost, meaning openness, was heavily inspiring the masses. In Leipzig, regular folk started gathering at St. Nicholas Church for peaceful candlelit marches. And get this, despite severe death threats from the secret police, those crowds swelled to tens of thousands. They were demanding an end to oppressive rule and doing it without firing a single shot.
Section 4. The gates swing open. Overwhelmed guards yield to the people.
So that brings us right back to the night of November 9th, just moments after Schabowski's accidental announcement hits the evening news. Picture the incredible tension at the border. Thousands upon thousands of citizens hear the broadcast and immediately press against the gates, demanding to cross. The guards are completely blindsided. They're making frantic phone calls, but their superiors are just totally silent. The guards are vastly outnumbered, and frankly, nobody in the East German command structure wants to take personal responsibility for ordering lethal force against such an overwhelming crowd.
And the media just amplifies the whole situation exponentially.
West German news programs, which everyone in the East secretly watched, broadcast the monumental news. Anchorman Hans-Joachim Friedrichs goes on air and proclaims, "The gates in the wall stand open wide." Once people heard that on TV, even more East Germans rushed to the border checkpoints. The crowds escalated to completely uncontrollable numbers.
This is where the human element of history is so incredible. At exactly 22:45, Commander Harold Jaeger at the Bornholmer-Strasse checkpoint finally gave in. The pressure was just too much. He yielded, ordering the barrier open and letting the people through with little to no identity checks. Just like that, the Iron Curtain cracked. East Germans literally poured through, and they were greeted by West Germans waiting with flowers and champagne.
Instantly, people are climbing up on the wall in wild, tearful celebration. And then we get the Wallpeckers, or Mauerspekte in German. These were everyday citizens from both sides, suddenly armed with hammers, pickaxes, and chisels, who literally began dismantling this oppressive concrete barrier by hand. The physical destruction of the wall began the very same night it opened.
Section 5. A world transformed. The end of the Cold War era.
The geopolitical shockwaves of November 9th were absolutely massive. The dominoes completely fell. Less than a year later, on October 3, 1990, East and West Germany formally reunified. The Cold War, which had terrified the globe for decades, was effectively over. Soviet influence completely collapsed, and communist regimes right across Eastern Europe were swiftly replaced by democratic systems.
But looking back at the historical record, it's really vital to note that the international response wasn't universally celebratory. While the German people obviously rejoiced and the U.S. strongly supported the democratic shift, some European leaders were actually deeply anxious. British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and French President François Mitterrand privately opposed reunification. Their fear was that a newly unified, highly powerful Germany might alter post-war borders and destabilize the balance of power in Europe. We're just looking at this impartially, but it really highlights exactly how complex and fraught this massive power shift truly was. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to really reflect on. If a decades-old, heavily guarded, fully militarized concrete barrier that literally defined global politics can fall practically overnight just because of a bureaucratic miscommunication, what does that say about the seemingly permanent divides in our world right now? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the history that shapes our world,